Is the meta actually better right now than it ever has been? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Stylosa and this is Unit Lost, and let's talk about the current meta of the game. Now, you will remember a video I made a while ago, and I said the meta doesn't necessarily mean better, and that is totally true, and I've actually got evidence of this, because the current meta is this, right? It is triple tank. Now, the triple tank or the heavy tank builds have been around for a while, but they work extremely well in the current version of the game. And the reason for this, well, it's quite simple. You have one tank who can soak up a tremendous amount of damage, Mr. Reinhardt. You have another tank who can assassinate people, Mrs. Diva, or Miss Diva, I guess it would be. You have another, and also soak up a tremendous amount of damage as well. Let's not forget that about Diva. And she's got a load of health and armor anyway. My god, Diva. Then we've got Roadhog, a tank who can pump out a ton of damage. And I mean a ton of damage. Oh, and he can also assassinate people with his hook as well. Because we all know the hook works, right? Right, guys? Right? Yeah, right, let's move on. And then we've got Zarya, who is sort of like... she's almost like a flex tank at the moment. Like, you don't always need a Zarya now because of the way Diva is so powerful, and Diva can counter Zarya's ultimate. Zarya is quite strong against Diva in a 1v1 situation, but not when it comes to deploying the ultimate, and there's other considerations to take into, I guess, consideration. So, let's just look at this. Why the hell has this happened? Why are there these heavy tank builds? Well, it's like I've just explained. There is a tank which does everything. There's a tank that absorbs damage, a tank that assassinates people, and a tank that pumps out loads of damage. Reaper is the best, sort of the best guy to look at. Where is Reaper? Like, can somebody please tell me where Reaper is? Because I have not seen Reaper in a very long time. In fact, the only people I've seen playing Reaper are Reaper mains, people who just can't play anything else, and they play Reaper. Now, I'm not saying Reaper's a bad pick, and that he shouldn't be played because he's not in the meta, because that's totally fine. You can play whatever the hell you like, and sometimes going off meta will wreck these meta builds. But the triple tank, and the reason why Reaper is not there, is because Roadhog is now Reaper. Only Roadhog has way more health, he has his ridiculous hook, and he's got a pretty good ultimate. Now look at Reaper. Reaper pumps out a load of damage. He's the anti-tank character, but not actually at the moment, you see, because Roadhog is the anti-tank almost. Because when Roadhog's point blank and he's firing at you, he's doing tons of damage, much like Reaper does. Thing with Reaper, he was very powerful when Anna had the speed boost component to her nano boost. And what that meant is you could nano boost Reaper. Reaper could fly into the enemy team and just destroy them because he would move too quick. They couldn't stop him. He's in the back line. He's destroying everybody. Now, it's pretty much impossible to get in there and wipe out an enemy team because if they've got a Reinhardt, if they've got a Roadhog, which they will have, they will just block your ultimate with their shield, or Roadhog will hook you. Or Diva, well, there'll be a Diva as well. She'll stand there with defense matrix on top of you, so you literally cannot do anything, and then you die. And then it's like, well, I should have been playing Roadhog, and that's the problem. Now, is this meta actually better? This was the question I posed at the start of this video. Well, initially, I was like, yes, it is, because I can play Soldier 76. It might sound boring, but he's probably my favourite character in the game. I've always enjoyed playing Soldier. I don't know why. I've just always enjoyed playing him. So I guess I don't really need a reason, do I? But when he came out of favour, and it wasn't really because he was out of the meta, it was there were other heroes that were just better than him. And that's where I have an issue with when people get confused with meta and heroes falling in and out of favour. Because there are heroes that will get used in a meta, so a meta is just a standard way of playing a game. But then you get situations where before we had Soldier who was just no good. You may as well take McCree because McCree was better at Soldier's job. Now Soldier does his job, right? And you see Soldier coming back into the game in a pretty big way because Soldier can pump out quite a lot of damage. McCree can still pump out damage, and I covered this in a video. They're still both viable, but Soldier is more so viable now than he was before. But now we've got this situation with Reaper where you don't really care about Reaper because you've got this big Roadhog guy who is just better than Reaper at Reaper's job. But then you've also got other elements coming into the game, and it's Diva. I'm afraid Diva is probably the biggest thing which has changed in the game, because if you look at Reinhardt, he's not changed. If you look at Zarya, she's had some slight sort of nerfs, but also a pretty major buff in the way her damage is applied from a weapon. So in case you didn't know, Zarya's weapon was a beam, but it wouldn't do constant damage. It would pulsate damage. So I can't remember what the figures are, but just let's say every half a second it did damage. But what that meant is when you were targeting people, if you targeted them on the half a second where you weren't going to do damage, you wouldn't damage them. Now it just applies damage all the time. So it's more consistent damage. Zarya is in a great place, and I think she's fine. But the problem is Diva is in the game, and Diva can eat Zarya's ultimate. Zarya's ultimate was, and I've on record saying this, saying it's the best ultimate in the game. It was. It kind of isn't so much now. It's still extremely good. But if Diva eats your ultimate as Zarya because it takes such a long time to build it, that you have been countered by just a normal ability, and that is always a crushing thing to happen. Pretty much like Reaper. If Reaper's doing his Death Blossom and then he gets a flashbang thrown into his face, or if Roadhog's ult in and gets a flashbang thrown into his face, or he gets hooked or something, you know, he gets knocked down or something which stops him using his ability, or he gets hacked by Sombra, I guess, then his ultimate is gone, and that is crushing. Like, to be able to shut down an ultimate with a standard ability is quite powerful. So now what we've got with Zarya is she's great, and she can kill Diva in a 1v1 pretty easily, to be honest. And she's very good against Genji and even against the other tanks, to be honest. She's pretty good. But her ultimate is maybe not the greatest right now because you can't rely on it to consistently group the team up. Because if you go in and land a Graviton and it does pull in the Diva and it pulls in the Reinhardt, well, if your Tracer wants to go in and do the black hole combo, so she wants to drop the bomb into your black hole, well, you've got Reinhardt's barrier there, which you might put it on. You've got Diva, who just might eat it. So it's like there's a lot of counters now to ultimates or standard ultimate combinations that we've been seeing for a very long time, and this does make it interesting, or it did make it interesting. You see, I want to kind of go back on what I said at the start of the season, going, wow, this is such an interesting meta that the game's in right now, because it kind of is, or it was at the start, and this was the mistake I made. I called it too early. It was interesting. And it was great to see Soldier back because it felt fresh, it felt new. Seeing Diva being played, it felt great again because I like playing Diva and I like playing Soldier. So to me, this was like, wow, this is awesome. I don't just have to play Zarya and Reinhardt and Lucio all the time. I can play all the other characters that I enjoy playing. In fact, I like playing Anna as well. But now, it's like it started to sort of settle. And you are seeing in every single game, you will have triple tank. It might not always be a Reinhardt, it might be a Winston instead, or it might be a Zarya. But what you will always see is a Diva and a Roadhog because they're so good. Like, Roadhog can just annihilate 200 HP heroes instantly. If he hooks you and then he fires at you and then melees you, you're dead. You're probably dead after he fires at you, right? That means he can kill all of the DPS. Like, he just kills them. He doesn't even care. It also means that when it comes against other tanks, he can shut them down quite effectively. If Reinhardt is charging in, he can hook Reinhardt. That stops his charge, pulls him in, does damage to him. It won't kill him, but it's going to stop him charging. And he's just very effective in that way. He's DPS. He's not really a tank. He is a tank in the sense he can take a ton of damage, but he is also DPS because he pumps out loads and loads of damage. Especially if the enemy team's got other tanks on, his right click does a lot of damage if you manage to detonate the projectile at the right range. So if Reinhardt's coming around with his barrier, you can eat the barrier. And this is why I made the video a while back talking about Reinhardt and how things have changed for Reinhardt, because they really have. Because Reinhardt's barrier just gets annihilated because Soldier 76 is in the game, Diva is in the game, and, well, Roadhog's always been in the game. Those three, when they're on the same team firing into a Reinhardt barrier, the Reinhardt barrier just disappears. Like, it is non-existent. But the thing with that is, if they're going with that sort of team build, maybe they don't have a Reinhardt anyway. They could, because that could be their third tank, or it could be a Zarya. Now, I play quite a bit of Reinhardt, and I still do. Like, I was skeptical, and I thought, you know what, I might not play that much of Reinhardt this season. But actually, I am enjoying playing Reinhardt, arguably more than I did last season. This is because there are a lot more opportunities to use Earth Shatter, because when there's not an enemy Reinhardt on the other team, well, you can just Earth Shatter at will, and it's such a, like, I mean, it's so easy to do. You just shut the entire team down. It's like, oh, there you go. So that kind of forces them to bring a Reinhardt in, which may make them drop one of their sort of other tanks, like maybe they drop a Diva, maybe they drop the Roadhog, although I doubt that. I highly doubt that. But I want to talk about sort of win percentages as well. The games I've had Roadhogs in, they've been there's a very high chance of winning if the Roadhog is decent. Now, the Roadhog needs to land hooks, and it's always kind of been the same thing with Roadhog, right? But when Roadhog, you have this character that can just remove an enemy player before the fight even begins, it's crazy powerful. Now, what it means is you basically win more games with the Roadhog. The issue is, Roadhog hasn't been changed. Like, if we look at the changes, Reinhardt's not been changed. This is for the tanks. So Reinhardt's not been changed. Diva, her defense matrix has been tweaked. She can move, well, this has happened over a couple of months, I guess. But the recent changes to her is she can move while she fires, but move faster. And she's got more health, well, more armor. So it gives her a combined 600 armor and health, which is quite a lot. Then you've got Roadhog, who hasn't been changed. Then you've got Zarya, who's been changed. In slight ways, which I explained. So when you look at those tanks, then you've got Winston, who's not been changed. So you look at these tanks, right? You've got Winston, pretty situational, because Winston can take out Widowmaker, or maybe you've got a Genji that's a problem or something like that. Winston can deal with that. Then, or maybe they've got a Tracer or something. Like, Winston's going to be good against kind of squishy targets like that. Winston's just Winston, right? He's always been the same, and I don't really see Winston as having less use this meta or more use. I think he's just kind of the same. Then you look at Reinhardt, which I thought was going to have a drop-off in use. He kind of hasn't, but the way he's played is much different. It's not so much about standing there with your barrier now. Your barrier just gets absolutely liquidated and it's gone. So then you have to be a bit more clever and be a lot more tactical with Earth Shatters, unless there isn't an enemy Reinhardt, in which case you can just Earth Shatter at will, which is crazy. Then you've got Zarya. Now, really, on the face of it, Zarya's not changed, to be honest. She still is Zarya. She still does quite a lot of damage. She's still very good at killing Genjis, if you can track them. She's still very good at killing Divas. The problem is, her ultimate is not just this instant win button like it was before. If you grabbed somebody, or well, I say somebody, if you grab the enemy team, which is, let's be honest, pretty easy to pull off the grab because it's got such a large area of effect, it pulls everybody in. A Pharah comes in, a Tracer comes in, a Roadhog uses ultimate on it, whatever. It's just going to destroy everybody in that. Now, that's not the case anymore because Diva can stop your ultimate. And Diva is in a lot of games. But why is Diva in a lot of games? She is the catalyst. She's the one that's changed this meta. This is because Diva's way more survivable. She can move faster when she fires. And a defense matrix has been changed, as I said, from initially the way the defense matrix worked is when you put it up, it just fully deployed the defense matrix and then it went on cooldown. Then it was available like on tap, so you could press your alternate fire and your shield would come up, then drop down, and it had sort of a charge bar, but it was instant. That was a bit too OP. Now there's a bit of delay from when you deploy it, and you can't just keep deploying it every second and like endlessly have a defense matrix up, so you have to be careful with it. But most of the time Diva will have a defense matrix available, and a good Diva will know, oh yeah, they're about to grab us, so they'll get ready to eat the ultimate of Zarya, and that shuts her down. But it's not just about eating Zarya's ultimate, it's eating loads of ultimates, and it's the way Diva works with Reinhardt, because Diva supplements his barrier. If Diva is standing behind Reinhardt and defense matrixing through his barrier is way more durable, and that is insanely powerful, and that's why Diva's in the game. Not to mention when Diva jumps onto most of the support, she can kill them instantly. She's very good against other DPS. She can have an issue with, well, I say other DPS. She's not even DPS, but she's very good against DPS. She can have an issue with Soldier if she jumps onto a Soldier and Soldier drops his biotic field and keeps firing at her sort of crit spot in her face when she's in a mech. That will probably take the Diva out of the mech and you might be able to kill her. But in a lot of cases, Diva can do a ton of damage, and she does a ton of damage, but it's very point-blank close range. What that means is when you're engaging a Reinhardt in the barrier war, you can just walk up to him and just blast his shield down, and that makes Diva crazy powerful. I think Diva's in a pretty good place right now, but it has changed the game in a lot of ways which maybe were unforeseen. To quote a very famous game, Unforeseen Circumstances, I believe, was the is that the first level of Half-Life? I think it is, something like that. And then you've got Roadhog, who hasn't really changed, but he's having his hook looked at because it's broke. But yeah, it's so interesting to me to watch the way this develops and the way everything starts to change and shift. Now, at the start of this video, I did say the meta doesn't necessarily mean better, and I've made a video which basically says this. And the reason for this is, well, it's quite simple. I play with a guy who plays a lot of Pharah, and Pharah is actually fairly effective in this meta. She wasn't before, but she kind of is more so now. This is because while Soldier 76 is in most games, and he does do quite a lot of damage if Pharah gets close to him, at very long range, it's very difficult to put enough damage onto the Pharah to sort of get rid of her or force her back, because you're only really going to poke her at long range. If she comes close to you, yeah, you can burn her down. But then when you've got 3 tanks that are on the team with honestly only Roadhog with his hook who can really touch you, you can sit there and just fire rockets into the team. Now, Reinhardt's going to block it with his barrier, sure. Diva's going to block the rockets with a defense matrix, but you're still going to put the damage in and it's still going to be effective. Sombra is an interesting one as well. I think Sombra is not in a very good position right now, but she has a very good ultimate. And you will see teams, and I've seen this on ladder, I think this comes from the pro games, but what they'll do is just wait for Sombra to get her EMP, and then they'll use that as the engage, because it will remove all of the barriers. And if there's barriers in play, there's Reinhardt's and there's all of that stuff, it's very powerful. And suddenly, you can just walk straight in, there's no barrier, they can't use their abilities for 6 seconds, and you can just kill them. It's really powerful. But that's all Sombra really does. But the reason why you see that is because it's such a tank-heavy meta right now. There are other heroes as well, like Reaper. Like I said, I don't think Reaper is necessarily that bad. It's just that Reaper can be shut down in a lot of different ways. Genji is another one as well. Genji's not too effective against triple tanks. Sure, he can go in and start slashing his blade around, but it's not really going to kill them. But Genji can still be effective. If Genji goes in and takes out Ana, because Ana is, I honestly believe, the best hero in the game right now, and I'll probably make a more detailed video on this, but Ana is literally the best hero in the game. Anna and Lucio, or Anna and Zenyatta in the backline, Genji can kill them. And if he does, then the tanks have got no support and you should be able to clean them up. So there is always ways of making things work. Don't always think to yourself, oh my god, we need to have 3 tanks. Because I've been in games where we've had 1 tank and won because we've been like extremely DPS heavy and the tanks just can't absorb that much damage. That being said, in those games, if their tanks or their Roadhogs landed good hooks, if their Divas defense matrix at the right time, they could easily have won. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been Stylosa and this is Unit Lost. I want you to comment below with how you have experienced the meta so far this season. I think it is almost becoming a little bit stale right now because it's quite predictable. But that doesn't mean that it's going to affect the way you play the game, because you can still go off meta and you can still take out enemy teams. Like Bastion, for example, is actually quite effective against triple tank because of the damage he puts out. He can rip through barriers, he can rip through tanks. Normally what happens when you go into a fight is you kind of want to kill the Roadhog, pretty much. If it's a frontal fight, both teams slam into each other. Unless you're Genji or somebody and you can dive into the back line and kill the supports, you want to try and kill that Roadhog because that is the damage source in a lot of teams these days. If you get rid of that, you generally win the fight. Alright guys, like I said, I'm in Stylosa, this is Unit Lost. Do comment below with what you think or what you feel about the current meta right now, because it's interesting. It's stale in a way, but it doesn't have to be stale. Like I said, it depends like how you want to use it. Like the thing with the meta is, if you expect the enemy team to be triple tank, if you expect them to be a certain setup, you can run a certain setup against that and possibly try and beat that. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it at that. Leave a comment below and do follow me on Twitter, which is @UnitLostGaming, and I will catch you on the next one, guys. Toodaloo. Oh, and thanks for coming.